Hello and welcome to the Elite Endurance Podcast, the podcast where I, your host, George Bennett, interview professional endurance athletes. On this episode, I'm joined by Matt Stonier, a 21-year-old who has begun to take the world by storm in the 1500. In 2022, he represented England at the Commonwealth Games and Team GB at the Euro Championships before signing his first professional contract with Nike. Hope you will enjoy this episode, and without further ado, let's jump in. Welcome Matt Stonier to the podcast. So for those who don't know you, can you just give yourself a brief introduction?
Cheers, thanks for having me on.
No worries.
Name's Matt Stonier. I'm a middle distance, mainly 1500 metre runner from Loughborough.
So for you, 2022 was like a huge breakthrough year. You ended up competing in Commonwealth Games, Euro cross country, as well as the European champs on the track, both in the 1500, and you got to the finals in both of them. So can you just kind of like break down how your 2021 season leading up into it went, and kind of how did that prepare you for these two big championships?
Sure. Well, my 2021 season was the first year at university. So it was my first year of being set up at Loughborough, getting myself into the new program, a new kind of type of training with new people as well, pushing myself, going from club where you leave almost kind of at the top of the tree at the front of training to going to somewhere near the middle of the pack. And it was great adjusting to that and understanding how life is like at university and being able to fit in running with university and actually having more time to run than maybe you would have had at school. So I just got a good kind of block of training in, a good winter, and then just kind of set myself up for track season just to run as quick as possible. There weren't any goals. Euro under 23s was a bit far away, and I knew I wasn't quite at that level. So it was just about running as quick as possible, enjoying it as much as I could. And thankfully, I was able to do that. Running 3:39 at Watford, the BMC, and then I made the final of British Champs 15, which went pretty much under the radar because it was the Olympic year and all eyes were on the top three, and understandably. And then my season was cut short because of COVID, and then that kind of ended. And then next thing you knew, it was kind of gearing up for winter again, and then what would have been 2022 season, which went pretty well.
Yeah, so obviously you spoke about Loughborough being your university of choice. So what does the program sort of offer to you that you possibly wouldn't get at other universities across Britain? Because I know that Loughborough's got quite like a bespoke training setup in comparison.
I was very lucky to be offered a scholarship to Loughborough, and that was off the back of not doing much. I'd only been to one Euro cross as an under 20. So I was quite fortunate that they offered me a scholarship and no other uni did. So I think that kind of put me going towards Loughborough. And then they had this setup where all athletes from different sports can go in Claudia Parsons, which is an athlete block. And it essentially allows you to have that focus of you're surrounded by athletes. I had 8 in my flat and we were all different sports. We had 3 or 4 rugby players, and you all kind of come together with the same goal of being the best at your sport. So there's less nights out, is more disciplined, everyone's cooking together, healthy meals, less takeaways. And it's just a really good environment to surround yourself by other people, all with a similar goal. And I don't know many other unis that do that. So that was also kind of a selling point to go to Loughborough. And then on top of that, the training group was great. I knew going there I was going to surround myself with elite athletes, like 3:36 runners and sub 14 runners, which I hadn't done before. And I know lots of unis now are able to use that as a selling point, but going to University Loughborough was definitely one of the top programs. And just being able to surround myself with those kind of people just helped me ground myself, work hard, and then just hopefully train with them to hopefully get better, which has happened.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if this is a myth about Loughborough, but I've heard there's a block that you can change the altitude of the room. Is that true?
Yeah, so that's actually in the Elite Athlete Hotel, which is
Oh, right.
literally next door to Claudia Parsons A block. I've been in there. We stayed there before the Commonwealth Games, but they didn't have the altitude. I don't know what altitude on, because I'd never been, and I'd have just completely ruined myself before commies. But they do
Yeah.
have the setup there. I don't know how often it gets used, but you do see a lot of elite sports, Team GB sports use that hotel facility. Like throughout our first year, once a month or so, you see some sort of GB team, men's cricket, women's cricket, wheelchair basketball, all using that hotel. So it's definitely one of the best for sports.
Yeah, cool. So obviously moving forward now into probably the biggest season of your life, you ended up qualifying for Commonwealth Games and had a cracking race and came seventh overall. So how did how did the qualification end up happening, and how did the races go? Obviously, I mean, so many people have started talking about you, and obviously then you signed Nike. So yeah, it's been a crazy year. So how was the qualification like for Commonwealth Games, and what was it like to represent England for the first time?
Yeah, originally the qualification wasn't really on my radar. I knew you basically had to be in the top two or three English runners. That's
Yeah.
obvious. And with that, hopefully you'd run a good time. So that was always kind of in the back of my mind. I know there was a coach who told me, I think it was in the November 2021, said that
Hmm.
he reckons that I have an outside shot at making commies, but I had to change a few things. And I didn't. And then roll around 8 months later and I made the team. So I knew I was maybe going to be considered and thought of as an outside chance. And it wasn't really until Emsley Carr, and then that kind of just started the whole whirlwind. And from there, it was just race after race and taking every opportunity. And I ran 3:37.2 at Birmingham. And that was the first time I thought, actually, I might have a chance here, because you had to run sub 3:37. And I'd got pretty fortunate with quite a few injuries for the English runners. I know Grice had been through injury, Josh had been through injury, Elliot. So there was a gap opening up, and I knew if I kept running that on that same trajectory, I might have a chance. I know George Mills was also in that similar boat, but being able to beat him at MZ Carr in Birmingham, I thought maybe I'd just have the edge on him. But I know he's a really good racer, and you never know what's going to happen. And then it wasn't until Poland, Bydgoszcz was one of the Continental Gold Tours, and I managed to run 3:35.92, I think it was there. And that's when it was like, okay, I have a really good chance here. I've run the standard. I had the fastest time for an Englishman at that point. And without me knowing, my coaches had bought tickets after that race for commies. And they didn't tell me until I'd been selected, but that was them almost assuming that I'd make the team. But
Yeah.
there was one caveat that you had to run the standard twice, and I hadn't. And so I went to Sweden to hopefully run the time again, and only ran 3:38 in what was quite a tough race, quite windy. I had to front run it. No one wanted to run quickly, which was what I needed. And I thought after that I'd lost my chance, and it wasn't until a few days later that I got a call. So it was a whirlwind time, and every
Yeah.
race went well, but I still wasn't sure if I'd get selected.
Yeah, so you went from running 3:37. Was that a PB at the time? And then obviously you cut it down to 3:35, which is 2 seconds for those who are listening who don't know, is like a huge way to cut down in a 1500. What was the training like between then, and how did you do it basically?
Yeah, I don't think it was anything different. I think that 3:37 was on a windy afternoon
Mm,
in Birmingham, which in context, it probably was worth a quicker time considering the race was only won in 3:35.
yeah,
Um, so it was just a belief that I could run at that pace. And I think that really helped. And then the Poland race, it was a lot better. It was an evening race, which I'd prefer. There was no wind. There was good pacing and a good quality field where I knew I'd be around that top three or four, which I think helps you rather than thinking you're going to be at the back of the race, which is what I was for Birmingham. Um, and being able to run 3:35 there, I felt great. And I felt like I probably had another second or two in that race. It was quite messy, and maybe I didn't have the best last lap that I could have done tactically. So I thought there was maybe a bit more room in the tank after that race, which helped the confidence. But yeah, that race was really the turning point.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting how you say that, because it's just like, at the end of the day, just the consistency that you kept and maintained throughout obviously helped when the stars aligned and you had the right weather for it. So kind of moving on, obviously, like we said, 2022, you had many races. I think you raced at least like 15 or 14 or 15 1500s. What was your favorite race throughout the whole time of 2022?
You can be pretty boring and just say the favorite races are the biggest and the best ones. Inevitably, commies, and then the other one was the MC car. Being able to win a race this summer, which I didn't get the chance to win many, because when you're racing against Jakob and Jake and all of that, like you're not going to be up there at the front. So having the opportunity to win a race in what still was a stacked field, I remember looking at the lineup for the MC car and thinking, this is so hard. I'm just going to be hanging on. So that evening of the MC car was definitely my favorite kind of evening of the summer.
Yeah.
And then commies was more the experience of the whole week, which kind of made it so special, and being able to watch everyone else, and that kind of added to the magic of commies. So I definitely say commies and MC car.
Yeah. So you've competed quite a bit also, like as an under 23 and also under 20, like in these kind of standard BMC sort of races. You just touched on briefly about racing against Jakob and like Jake Whiteman and stuff like that. So what is the jump like from kind of being someone that probably looks up to these amazing 1500 meters and then to like standing next to them on the line?
It's surreal. You go from almost admiring them as idols to racing against them as competition.
Yeah.
And you have to change your mindset as to how you see them. But it's just a great opportunity. I think you can just pinch yourself and sit in the cool room and look at these guys and think that's where you belong. And you just have to believe that this is hopefully your future and where you'll see yourself. And hopefully in the next couple of years, they'll go and look at me and go, yeah, it's him again. He's keeps showing himself. He keeps making these championship races and these senior races. So it's mainly just so surreal, and it's hard to describe the jump, because even when you're racing in BMCs, you look at your competition as competition, and you look at your competition at Commonwealth Euros as competition. So you see them as the same person, but outside of the actual race, it does feel very different and just crazy to be amongst them.
Yeah. And I feel like as well, I think for me personally, if I was there, like, what's the experience like in a race when you're like, obviously I know Jakob has this style of kind of racing in the middle of the pack or even at the back and then just kind of gassing past people. What's it like to be racing these people when you're actually kind of in the motion of moving, or is it more just like focused down and you're not really thinking about who they are and just more like, yeah, what's it like for that?
You have to focus on yourself. If you're worried about what everyone else is doing, you're not going to perform to the best of your ability.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I'm not thinking about what Jakob's done. He's about 100 meters ahead of me, aiming for world leads and world records. I'm not interested in what he's going to do for me, apart from make the race really quick. So you do have to focus on your own race. You'll have a goal of one or two people who you'd like to beat, or at least get close to. And you have to be realistic with who you want to kind of aim to beat. And that's a good marker to kind of help you stay motivated during the race when it does get hard, or maybe you get stuck behind someone and your race plan isn't going perfectly. So you do have to remain focused, stick to your own kind of race plan, and then from there you can work out who you want to beat and who you like to aim for.
Yeah. So for someone who hasn't raced on the track before or interested in kind of looking into racing on the track, what would obviously that was some great advice that you just gave there, but if someone's wanting to, I don't know, race a 5K or a 1500 or even a 10K, like what would be your kind of best top tips for someone who's just wanting to start out in track running?
Have your own idea of what you want to go in achieving and how you're going to do that. So tactically, what you're going to do, pace-wise, what you'd like to go through 800 in or in the 5K, the first 2K, and then know yourself what you might be able to achieve in that last K or last lap, for example. And then from there, you can either take that as running like a time trial and just getting a time, or you can go in with the attitude of just winning the race and having a very kind of set race strategy. And it varies depending on the race, the type of race, who you're racing against. So depending on if you want to race, win the race, you need to go in with a tactically set plan, a way you want to run it, and you should try and stick to that as much as you can. And if you want to go for a time, just know what targets you want to hit during that race, what splits you're aiming for. And hopefully that should help you during the race to remain focused, stay relaxed, and then hopefully you can enjoy it by the end.
Yeah, that sounds like some great advice. I actually managed to watch you race the Highgate on at the night of 10K PBs, and it was just great to see you like moving up through the field and like because it ended up being quite a tactical race in the end, and yeah, seeing you gas through was just so great. So also like last year, like I've already said many times, it was a great year for you. But to kind of add the icing on the cake, you ended up signing with Nike. So kind of how did that deal come about and kind of how has it helped you progress as an athlete?
Yeah, it was very out of the blue. I thought I might be on the verge of a pretty small contract with probably a lesser known brand if I ran around that 337, 338 mark. And then it wasn't until commies where everything just exploded. And next thing I knew, I was getting offered contracts, things I'd never seen before, and like pages of like just information and money and all that kind of stuff that I hadn't really thought that I'd be at that time. So it was quite a big step, but I had to focus on the racing for a bit. And then it wasn't until after Euros where we kind of sat down and discussed things, and I got sent a contract which me and my agent Sam looked over, and we found one which we liked. And Nike at the end of the day is like the number one, isn't it? Everyone's lying. People are lying if they say they don't want to sign with them. They're the big signing, and it was just a dream. Like I just pinch myself when I say, "Oh, I'm an athlete with Nike and stuff," and it's everyone's goal, isn't it? So that was always a dream, and thankfully it came true.
Yeah. I think what quite interests me about the Nike contract is obviously I think you can probably see I've got loads of Nike boxes in the background here. But like obviously the Nike shoes are kind of the top of the game. Obviously a lot of other shoe companies are now kind of catching up and making kind of racing a lot more interesting, where the Dragonflies are still they're still the best, but obviously a lot of other brands are kind of coming up against them. But if you had to run in one Nike shoe for the rest of your life, what would it be and why?
That's a great question. I don't know. It would be between two shoes, to be honest. It'd be the Invincible, which I wear for every run that's not a session,
Yeah.
or the Next Percent, because that's the go-to race day shoe if on the road or training on the track or tempos or whatever. So between one of those two shoes. But like you said, that was part of the reason for also signing with Nike, was the keeping everything the same. It was the shoe that I raced in, the shoe that I trained in for the track, for sessions, for easy runs. So it was just keeping it the same, knowing that these shoes have worked for me. I can trust them. I've not got injured from them. So just having that ability to remain the same was also another good reason for signing with them. And they are good shoes. Like we turn up to Loughborough on a Sunday long run and there might be 20 odd people all wearing Invincibles. So
Yeah.
it just goes to show that the shoe is clearly good and works for a lot of people. So it's not just me being biased.
Yeah. I think that's quite interesting that you said that you wear super shoes in training. I know quite a lot of people are outspoken saying kind of one way or the other. But what's your main reasoning behind wearing a super shoe during training?
Um, well, the choice of shoe really that I can wear that trains either the Streak Fly, the Turbo, the Peg Turbo, or the Next Percent.
Hmm.
And I just genuinely think that the Next Percent is the best shoe out of those three. You can get the best response out of it, run the quickest times with it. I do often wear the Streak Fly on the track.
Yeah.
Anything sort of 800-meter reps and shorter. I like the smaller stack height. Can kind of get moving a bit more in them, and it feels maybe more like a racing shoe as opposed to a longer shoe like the Next Percent. So I think it is just the all-round best training shoe that Nike have, and I know they've got some new ones coming out. Hopefully, at some point, I'll be able to try them, and hopefully, if they're anything like the old ones and they're newer, then they should be more than good enough.
Yeah. I thought what was quite interesting is there's been a lot of talk. Kind of, it was quite a while ago now, but do you remember the Pegasus Turbo 2s?
Yeah.
Did you ever have a pair of them?
Yeah. So I had one of the original pairs, which I obviously bought back in the day.
Yeah,
I used them a lot, to be fair.
I've got to say, I think they were my favourite kind of Nike shoe at the time, and a lot of people have said that they still are the best shoe. But I think I've ended up running over 1,000 K in them, and they're just not fit for purpose anymore. But anyway, so obviously now looking forward to 2023. What's your goals for the year? Are you racing indoors? What's the calendar looking like for the rest for the season?
Yeah, so I just got back yesterday from South Africa, my first ever stint at altitude, which was really cool, interesting, and hopefully pays off. I've got a couple of tests this week to see where I'm at fitness wise, and hopefully it should show an upward trajectory from before I left to South Africa. So that's going to be exciting. And then I'm racing this weekend in my first ever indoor race, 3K at Brigham. So that's another exciting opportunity to do something new. 3K is not something I've really touched on much, but I think I'm in more of a 3K shape than 15 now, especially of winter training and cross country, etc. And then after that, it's Bucks Cross, which is always a big one in the calendar for the university. It's nice to do a team event, and we should get lots of people down in Pembury, I think it is this year. And that will be a hard race. Birmingham have got a great team, and Simmies are always there, and Wiggy's going to be there, and he's obviously running really well. So the competition will be tough. And then beyond that, it's pretty open. There's the possibility of a World Cross Relay in Australia, which would be an amazing opportunity and a lot of travel. But I think if you get that opportunity to represent your country in a World Championships, it's almost impossible to turn down. And if not, maybe British Champs indoors. So the options are open. I don't want to be too concrete on what I'm supposed to be doing. And then after that, summer's pretty open at the moment. Obviously, there's a couple of races I'd like to do, like the Diamond League in London, a couple of other Diamond Leagues in Europe possibly, and then obviously World Champs would be the main goal. But I know there's a long way to go yet, and the team is ridiculous. We were in South Africa thinking of the 1,500 meter British Champs final, and we rattled off 10, 11 names that all could get that top 5, top 6 place. And then obviously you've got the big 4 with Neil, Jake, and Josh, and to beat any of them is always hard. And they're at the top of their game. They're 4 of the 12 best runners in the world, so that's going to be very tough.
Yeah, definitely. Have you seen? I'm not sure if you've seen any teasers of the Australian course, because they recently held their championships, and it's looking like it's going to be a really fast race because of how hard the ground is. So I think it will definitely be pretty cool to be able to race there and see what you can get over that 2K distance.
Yeah, I've seen the Aussies. I think Ollie Hoare and Stewie Max doing it.
They are.
It's going to be stacked, and that dry and that quick. The times run there could be crazy. So it would be a very cool event to do, but obviously we're not quite sure yet.
Yeah, for Worlds, would that be for GB or it would be for GB, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Um, so I think this really kind of leads well onto the next section, which is called No Context Track. So I sent you a photo over earlier. It's going to appear on the screen for those who are watching on YouTube, but for those who are listening on Spotify or wherever they get their podcast from, can you just describe what the photo is and then just tell the story behind it?
Yeah, so it's me at the end of Liverpool cross country, the Euro trials cross challenge. It's basically me completely finished at the end of the race, exhausted after 10k over mud and wet and just horrible terrain. That's pretty much the photo.
Yeah. I just wanted to ask this actually out of interest, but so you actually focused on the longer distance for the cross country this year at Liverpool for the Euro trials. What was kind of your reasoning behind this?
I just I think I run well off having a good base, and that winter training provides that. And
Yeah.
Liverpool's just one of those opportunities where from October through December, it's just something to do, and it's something to keep you motivated, to keep on track, to not kind of lose that direction.
Mm.
And Eurocross is one of my favorite events of the year. You've got 36, 40, I think it is now with the relay, like-minded people, all endurance runners, all similar kind of shapes, physiques, builds, like similar thoughts, and everyone just gets on, and it's just a really fun, exciting event that we tend to do quite well in as well. It helps when you've got Charles and Zach in your team as well.
Yeah.
So that is a really good event and something I do like to aim for each year. So that's pretty much why.
Yeah. So just kind of a final question on Eurocross. Obviously, you went out there with Charles and Zach. Kind of what's the team dynamic like when you're racing with these guys? Obviously, Zach's he's at uni in England, I believe, and then obviously you got Charles, who's the NCAA champion. Like, what's the team dynamic like? Obviously, Charles is pretty much like this kind of he's put on a pedestal. He's like the GOAT, and then obviously you've got all these other just normal British guys. So, how does it kind of the team dynamic work between you guys?
It's great because you never really are part of a team in cross country or in
Yeah.
running, and you all come together knowing you've got a great opportunity to win a gold medal. So the team aspect's brilliant, and Charles obviously comes from a team aspect in America and Stanford, and the team kind of camaraderie in America is huge, and it's
Yeah.
funny to see him how focused he is on the team. And when Zach crossed the line or when I crossed the line, he's almost celebrating more than when he won. So
Yeah.
it's really nice to see, and it's funny because he's the kind of person I wouldn't see at all throughout the year. And then the last 3 years, we spent 2 days together at Eurocross for the last however many years. So it's quite nice, and it's quite a cool experience to share with someone like that. And obviously Rory, not seeing him all year because he's in America, being able to see him for a couple of days, and it's a really good experience. And the team managers are great there as well,
Yeah.
and they all come from that endurance background. So it's a good spirit and good chat amongst everyone.
Yeah, that sounds cool. So I think this leads really well onto the final kind of questions of the podcast that I like to ask all of our guests. So starting off with everyone's favourite one. If you were stranded on a desert island and you could spend your last days living it out with anyone throughout history, factual or fictional, they're not allowed to be a family member or Bear Grylls because too many people say Bear Grylls. Who would it be and why?
It's such a hard question because I was trying to think of like anyone factual or fictional. If I went with like my idol at the moment, it'd probably be Tom Brady. He
Oh,
could
okay.
bring in American football, teach me how to play a bit, show me his Super Bowl rings. I don't know, be interesting, something different. I think he's actually a nice guy, which I get a lot of stick for because people go, "Oh, it's just all a front," and the top sportsmen are never nice people. They've all got just a persona for the media, but I genuinely think he's a nice guy. It might not be much help in getting off the island, but I wouldn't mind because I'd be stuck with him there for a bit. So
Yeah,
I'd go with that.
that sounds good. And finally, what's the funniest story you have that involves running? So it can be a drug testing story, something that's happened on the track, kind of something that's happened during training, anything like that.
Nothing that like screams to the front of my mind. Nothing I can think of. I've only ever been drug tested the one time at commies, and I got woken up at 7 a.m. and knocked on Ben's door. My roommate, well, not roommate, he was next to me, Ben Patterson, and I asked him if he wanted to be my you can have like a +1 essentially go with you. And this was at 7 a.m. and I've knocked on this door and he's basically just told me to F off. And looking back at it, I can totally see why he said that. But no, other than that, it's just people really falling over on runs. We had one, he won't mind me saying, we had one last year, a guy called Dan Rackle. And we were just running on this completely flat path. And there's like 10 plus people there and he's completely stacked it. Just like running over himself or something, just classic. And then everyone was just burst out laughing. And that's probably like happens once a month. That's always funny, but nothing I can think of that's much funnier, which sounds really boring. And people will go, you must be so bored on all these runs and stuff. But yeah, nothing too crazy.
Yeah. I think it's quite funny because some people have like extremely funny ones and then some people have just kind of no stories at all. And it's always strange that if like I had a guy on last year and he was saying that during lockdown he went on a run and he saw a man walking a duck with a lead, or just random things like that, or someone nearly drowned in a lake on a run, or then which I think that was actually
I need to go and run in these places. That's the thing, nothing goes on in Loughborough, so you don't get to see much.
That's obviously why you're such a good training hub. Everyone's just running and
yeah, everyone's just that bored.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. Thank you to everyone who's listened today, and we'll see you next week.